Education and heritage. The culture and heritage of education and learning in Ireland includes language, literature, music, art, folklore, and much more. In the Middle Ages, the monasteries dispensed learning to all who sought it, and in the larger towns there were schools conducted by clerics and laymen. Ireland was known then as the island of saints and scholars. Then came the Reformation, and the enemies of the old religion were threatened by the existence of the schoolmaster, the friar, and the Jesuit, and they decided to banish them from the land. The hunt began under Henry VIII in the 16th century and continued 100 years later with Cromwell. But the people loved learning, and devoted teachers were ready to risk their freedom and even their life to follow their vocation. The early hedge schools date back to the 17th century, mostly due to the penal laws after the Treaty of Limerick, when the Irish peasantry were denied all rights to education. There was much risk to people running a school in a house, so teaching and learning began under hedges or at the side of a grassy bank, hence the name hedge school. The teacher sat with his back to the hedge or bank, and the older boys took turns to act as lookouts for any movement or strangers who might be a danger to the school. The children were given instruction in the 3 R's: writing, reading, and arithmetic. And some teachers also gave instruction in Latin, history, and geography, and the classics to the older pupils. In wet weather, hedge schools were taught in hovels sheltered from view, a small, low mud hut with no door or window, just an opening in the wall. In cold weather, there would be a fire to keep the smaller children warm. The master was paid by the parents at so much per child per quarter. 1 and 6 or 2 shillings for the small ones learning to read and write, to 10 or 12 shillings for the young men learning the classics. The classes were small and students were poor. Their master was lucky if he made £40 a year. He did, however, get many presents from grateful parents, such as potatoes, butter, fowl, pieces of bacon, turf and milk. He also made a little on the side by writing letters, drawing up wills and other documents, or keeping accounts. For nearly another 100 years, and schools and schoolmasters, as far as Catholics were concerned, were completely outlawed. Heavy fines, imprisonment and deportation to colonies were imposed on schoolmasters or anyone who sheltered or shielded him. Rewards were offered to anyone who'd inform on the hedge schools. When things became more settled, many decent Protestants became repulsed with the indignities mounted upon their Catholic fellow Irishmen. In 1782, the Volunteer Parliament passed an act which gave Catholics some freedom to teach schools and to attend them. It was not until about the 1830s that a state system of education was available to everyone. In the meantime, the Irish people were determined to provide schooling for their children. Hedge schools continued for a time, and school buildings and other facilities mushroomed up rapidly. Printers produced school books for reading, with titles like Freeney the Robber, Famous Rogues and Rapparees, The Devil and Dr. Faustus, and The History of Witches. These look odd to us today and were really unsuitable as textbooks for teaching. There were up to 5 schools in the Drumsna area in the early 1800s, catering for both Catholics and Protestants. The schools were under different patronages and were mostly very badly attended. There was a hedge school in Milan, just outside of Drumsna, and when Father Geraghty took over as parish priest in the parish of Anaduff in 1832, he took it upon himself to set up a central school. A plot of ground was donated by the Walsh family, whose fine home was across the road from the site, and indeed the said house is still occupied until this day. The school was erected to accommodate over 100 pupils and was opened in 1839. The trustees were Father Gertie and Sir Joshua Rowley. A grant of £110 with £26 for fittings was granted by the commissioners. It was open each weekday from 10 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And even though 150 pupils were on the rolls, attendance was very poor. In 1891, a larger school was built with room for 4 teachers and 150 pupils. This fine old schoolhouse also still stands today, although it was made redundant in 1966 when the remaining pupils transferred to Anaduff National School in the centre of the parish. It is now used by Drumsna Boxing Club. A very successful school reunion was held in the building in the year 2000 and was attended by many past pupils from all over the globe. Going back to the past, there was also a school at the bottom of the Old Dublin Road into Drumsna, which was a classical school, where notables such as Dr. William O'Higgins, the Bishop of Ardagh, 1795 to 1853, was educated. He also laid the foundation stone for St Mel's Cathedral in Longford in 1840. He was first educated at home by his mother in his early years and learned Latin from a travelling pedagogue. He told of how he was taught at Drumsna by a Protestant clergyman, a Parson Kane, who was the Church of Ireland rector of Anaduff Parish at the beginning of the century. Also educated at this classical school was Francis McCann, the noted surveyor. Another attendee of Parson Kane's school was Dr. James Booth, a native of Lava, Drumsna, who excelled in Trinity College Dublin and gained a first place in maths and the classics. Mathematician Dr. Booth was also the innovator of the public examination. The Church of Ireland set up a school where Parson Kane's old school was sited, and this was established in 1826 when Drumsna had a population of 258. There were 4 rooms in the single-storey building, but only one was used as a classroom. The other 3 were used as the teachers' residence. About 3 miles from Drumsna and also in the parish of Anaduff was Listowel National School, which was built around the late 1800s. The nearest serving school at that time being at Headford, and this was a mud-walled cabin, and the teacher here was Timothy Conroy. The site for the new Listowel School was given free of charge by Arthur Jones, a landlord who had lands at both Listowel and Headford. By 1975, due to the fall in numbers attending Listowel, the remaining teacher and his pupils also transferred to Anaduff. Today, our heritage and learning thrive in Anaduff National School as the population has soared in the area. The children, who are the custodians of our heritage, are well catered for by both transport and teachers.